I should have seen this coming. I muttered to myself, pacing the room. This mess, this nightmare I'd found myself in, was supposed to be a dream job. But now I had no idea how deep the hole really was. My name is Aliana Voss, and I've spent years building my career in the lab only to watch it all come crashing down. What you're about to read is the untold story behind the scandal, the betrayal, and the secrets no one thought would surface. Trust me, you'll want to keep reading. Things are about to get really messy. The halls of this facility, once a small research center focused on autoimmune diseases, had become my second home. I had seen it all. The late nights filled with data analysis, the breakthroughs that made us proud, and the moments when we, as a team, celebrated the tiny victories that, in our world, meant everything. But today, something feels different. Something is about to change. I've always been known for my meticulous nature, my commitment to following the rules, and my ability to ensure that every procedure was done with the utmost precision. I suppose in many ways it was this very quality that allowed me to rise within Novamed. After all, there was little room for error in our line of work. One misstep could have catastrophic consequences, so I made sure I was always ahead of the curve, prepared for anything that might come my way. But even I couldn't have anticipated what would happen today. It was a quarterly staff meeting, nothing special really. I had been to countless such meetings over the years, and it had become a routine. But there was a palpable sense of unease in the room. As I walked through the glass doors of the conference room, the sharp scent of disinfectant hit me. The sterile white walls almost suffocated. The large conference table gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, its surface polished to a mirror shine. I slid into my seat, adjusting the navy blue blazer I'd worn on my first day at Novamed, the same one I'd worn countless times over the years. It was more than just a piece of clothing. It was a symbol of my years of hard work, my devotion to the company, and the pride I felt in being part of something that mattered. But as I sat down, I felt the tension in the air. Dr. Malcolm Whitner, the new CEO, was at the head of the table. His sharp suit and cold demeanor had been a constant since Meditech Solutions acquired Novamed 6 months ago. Back then I had hoped that the merger would bring new opportunities, but now I wasn't so sure. Meditech was everything we weren't, focused on numbers, speed, and profits rather than the careful, patient work we had always championed. I felt my stomach churn as Dr. Whitner's voice broke through the silence, his words sharp and unforgiving. "This is unacceptable, Aliana," he said, his voice booming through the room. "Your negligence has cost us millions." His words felt like a slap to the face. I sat frozen, the weight of his gaze, along with the eyes of my colleagues, pressing down on me. I wanted to defend myself, to explain that I had done everything by the book, but no words came. What was the point? This wasn't about the truth, it was about finding someone to blame. And today, I was that someone. "Dr. Voss," he continued, his thin lips barely concealing his anger, "you've failed us. The National Institutes of Health Grant Committee has cited significant irregularities in our compliance documentation. As a result, we've lost $8.4 million. He slammed his fist onto the table and I winced. How had it come to this? The room was quiet as I stared at the polished wood beneath my hands, my mind racing. How had I failed? What had gone wrong? These questions plagued me, gnawing at my insides, but there was no time for answers. Not here, not now. As a result of these compliance failures, Dr. Whitner announced, Dr. Aliana Voss is no longer with the company. Her office will be cleared by the end of the day. The words hit me like a punch in the gut, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. How had it come to this? How had my years of dedication, my hard work, been so easily discarded? I stood up, mechanically straightening my blazer as I walked out of the room. My footsteps echoed down the hallway, each step feeling heavier than the last. As I passed the open lab, I caught the eye of Dr. Erin Glass, one of Meditech's recruits. She quickly looked away, her face flushing slightly. That small reaction confirmed what I had suspected for weeks, but couldn't prove until now. Something was off, something was wrong in this place. I had always been the one who followed the rules. So why did everything feel so wrong now? I wondered as I walked towards my office. It wasn't just the loss of the grant or the accusations. It was something deeper. Something had changed since the merger. Something I had noticed, but couldn't quite put my finger on. And now it felt like the truth was slipping through my fingers, just out of reach. I stepped into my office, the familiar sight of the empty desk and shelves filled with scientific journals, doing little to comfort me. The plant by the window, the photographs of past lab teams, and the awards I had received over the years, they all seemed like distant memories now. What had happened to the company I had once loved? As I began to clear my desk, I felt a small, reluctant sense of satisfaction. I had always kept impeccable records. I had always been cautious, always made sure that the data was correct. But as I packed away my things, I realized something important. This wasn't just about losing a grant. It was about something far more personal. I had been betrayed, and now I had a choice: let it go or fight back. The thought of fighting back gave me a strange sense of calm. I would fight back, I told myself. This wasn't just about the money, it was about truth. And I would make sure that truth came to light. But I couldn't help but wonder, what had gone wrong? How had everything fallen apart so quickly? And was I the only one who had noticed? The phone buzzed on my desk, snapping me from my thoughts. It was a message from Thomas Reynolds, one of the technicians I had trained. Everyone's in shock. They're already interviewing replacements for you. Glass seems nervous. The message sent a shiver down my spine. I wasn't just losing my job, I was losing everything I had built here. And yet, somewhere deep inside, I knew that this wasn't the end of my story. It was only the beginning. The walk back to my office felt like a dream, as though my legs were moving but my mind was somewhere far, far away. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, that I had been caught in the crossfire of a battle I didn't understand. I had been with Novamed for so long, 15 years. I had built my career here step by step, from the bottom to where I stood now. But it had all come crashing down in the span of a few minutes. The words, "You're no longer with the company," echoed in my head, over and over, each repetition gnawing at the remnants of my sense of identity. I reached my office, the place that had been my sanctuary for so long, the place where I had spent endless hours poring over data, writing reports, and ensuring everything was done to the highest standard. Now, it felt foreign, cold. The clutter of personal belongings, the small potted plant on the windowsill, the framed certificates of achievement, none of it mattered anymore. It was all just symbols of a life that was slipping away. But beneath the numbness, there was a surge of something else. Anger. How could they do this? How could they discard me so easily after everything I had given to this place? They had no idea what I had done, the sacrifices I had made, the countless hours spent ensuring that everything was perfect, that every test was conducted properly, every result was recorded, every protocol followed. They didn't know what it was like to be the one who always picked up the slack, the one who made sure things were done right when no one else seemed to care. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I'm overreacting, I thought. This isn't about me, it's about the company. It's about the science. But deep down I knew it wasn't just about the science anymore. It had never been just about the science. It was about something deeper, something more personal. I wasn't just going to let them blame me for something I didn't do. They had to know the truth. As I started clearing my desk, methodically packing away years of work, my phone buzzed again. It was a text from Thomas. I opened it, reading his words carefully. "Everyone's in shock. They're already interviewing replacements for you. Glass seems nervous." The message made my heart skip a beat. I should have felt relief, knowing that my suspicions were confirmed, but instead I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. So, it's true, they're already planning to replace me. I stared at the screen, fighting the urge to type a response, to demand answers. How could they? But there was no time for that. I had to think. What next? What should I do now? The truth hit me like a slap. This wasn't just about me losing my job. This wasn't just about the grant. This was about something much bigger. They had taken something from me. My reputation, my integrity, the years of work I had put into making sure the research at Novamed was above reproach. And now, they were blaming me for their own mistakes. I couldn't let that stand. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor, and walked over to the filing cabinet in the corner of the room. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened the drawer, retrieving a plain black notebook. This was my personal ledger, a record I had kept over the years, A backup of all the discrepancies I had noticed in the data, the mistakes I had seen in the reports. It wasn't unusual for me to keep a private record. In fact, I was meticulous about it. If something didn't add up, if a number didn't seem right, I documented it. It was the only way to ensure that I had the evidence I needed in case anything went wrong. And now, something had gone terribly wrong. I opened the notebook, the pages filled with neat handwriting, each entry meticulously dated and cross-referenced. I began flipping through it, looking for anything that could help me make sense of what was happening. My mind raced as I scanned the notes, and then I found it, the entry that changed everything. 3 months ago, Dr. Glass had introduced a new trial protocol for an experimental arthritis treatment. At the time, I had questioned some of the changes, but I had been assured by Malcolm that it was part of the new corporate policy. "We need faster results," he had said, for the quarterly report to Meditech. And so, the trial accelerated, with timelines and data points being altered to fit the new schedule. But it didn't stop there. As I reviewed the records in my ledger, I realized that some of the data had been deliberately falsified. Chemical storage logs, trial results, important records had been tampered with. But how could I prove it? I wondered. What if I'm wrong? I didn't have concrete evidence yet, but the signs were clear. Dr. Glass, the rising star at Novamed, had been allowed to make these changes without oversight, without scrutiny. And now, that same person was the one being protected, while I was the one being thrown to the wolves. My phone buzzed again, and I picked it up, my heart pounding in my chest. The message was from Thomas again. "Everyone's talking about it. They say you're the reason we lost the grant. Glass is acting like she doesn't know what's going on." They're already rewriting the story, I thought, anger rising in my chest. They're already making me the scapegoat. I took a deep breath and closed the notebook, slipping it into my bag. This wasn't over. Not yet. I was going to find the truth. I was going to expose the lies, no matter what it took. As I walked out of my office one last time, I could feel the weight of the decision I had just made. It was a step into the unknown, a step I could never take back. But the truth had to come out. It was the only thing I had left. The hallway felt endless as I walked toward the exit, my mind racing with a whirlwind of thoughts. Each step seemed to echo, amplifying the weight of the decision I had just made. The glass doors of Novamed's building loomed ahead, and yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was waiting for me. I had never been one for rash decisions, but today felt different. Today, I wasn't just walking away from my job. I was walking away from a lifetime of work, a career that had been my identity for so long. I stood in the cold, my breath forming visible puffs in the winter air, the weight of the notebook still heavy in my bag. How far am I willing to go to expose the truth? I asked myself. The thought lingered, taunting me. I could feel the pull of doubt in the pit of my stomach, but it was drowned out by the urgency of the situation. I wasn't going to let this go. I couldn't. I walked across the parking lot, the crunch of gravel underfoot the only sound accompanying me. The world outside Novamed seemed so ordinary, so untouched by the storm that was brewing in my life. People went about their day as usual, commuters hurrying to their cars, a jogger weaving through the lot, a few birds chirping in the trees above. It was all so normal. And yet everything had changed. My entire world had been upended in the span of a few minutes. The quiet suburban streets I had once found comfort in now felt alien to me. What will happen next? I reached my car, a nondescript sedan that had always been my escape from the chaos of work. The engine hummed to life as I slid into the driver's seat, but my mind was 1,000 miles away. I knew what I had to do. I had to gather my evidence. I had to expose the corruption and restore my reputation. But how? The ethics board? OSHA? Both? My mind jumped from one plan to the next, but each one felt more daunting than the last. Was I prepared for the fallout? I had no answers. All I had were the facts, the records, the notes in my ledger. But was that enough to bring down a system so deeply entrenched in corporate greed and power? The higher-ups at Meditech weren't going to let this go easily. And what about Dr. Glass? She was clearly involved, but how much did she know? Was she complicit, or was she another pawn in a larger game? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that the stakes were higher than I had anticipated. this wasn't just about clearing my name, it was about something bigger. It was about ensuring that the integrity of science wasn't compromised for corporate interests. It was about holding people accountable for their actions, no matter how high up the ladder they sat. As I pulled into my driveway, the weight of the decisions ahead pressed down on me. I could feel the tension in my muscles, the familiar tightness of anxiety curling in my chest. What if I fail? I wondered. What if they bury the truth? It was a terrifying thought, but I couldn't let fear stop me. The truth was too important. I sat in the car for a moment, staring at the front door of my house, willing myself to take the next step. I had a plan, but it felt like walking on a tightrope. One wrong move and everything could come crashing down. But I couldn't back out now. Not when I had come this far. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my bag and walked into the house, the door closing softly behind me. Inside, everything was quiet. Too quiet. It should have been a comfort, but instead it felt hollow. The silence in my home mirrored the silence that had settled over my thoughts. Empty, uncertain. I set my bag down on the kitchen counter and stood there for a moment, trying to gather my thoughts. The phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping me out of my reverie. I pulled it out, my hands shaking slightly as I glanced at the message. It was from Thomas again. "Everyone's still talking about you. People don't know what to think anymore. I just don't get it. They're already looking for replacements." I felt a pang of something sharp in my chest. Was this what they thought of me now? A replacement? A mere cog in the machine? Easily discarded? I thought I had mattered more than that. I thought bitterly. But the truth was, I wasn't just any cog. I was a guardian of the truth, and no matter what happened next, I wasn't going to let that go. I glanced over at the counter where my bag sat. The notebook inside it, filled with the damning evidence, was a reminder of what had to be done. I had to act, and I had to act fast. If I didn't expose this now, it would only continue to spiral out of control, and I couldn't let that happen. With a sigh, I walked to my desk and booted up my laptop. The keys clicked under my fingers as I began to organize the evidence, the timeline, the discrepancies, the falsified records. I started typing up a detailed report to the ethics board, outlining everything I had found. This was it. The moment of truth. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was protecting the integrity of the science I had spent my career building. But even as I wrote, a part of me couldn't help but wonder. What would happen after? What would life be like after I sent this report? Would I be remembered as the whistleblower who stood up for what was right, or would I be silenced, just another casualty of the corporate world? I couldn't answer those questions yet. All I knew was that the truth had to be told. And if no one else was going to do it, then it had to be me. The evidence was in my hands now, and I wouldn't let it slip away. This was my fight. And I would see it through to the end. As I sat at my kitchen table, the glow of my laptop screen illuminated the room in sharp contrast to the fading light outside. The documents I had gathered, emails, screenshots, notes from my ledger, were scattered before me like a jigsaw puzzle that, when pieced together, would expose the truth. But there was something unsettling about seeing it all laid out so plainly. The evidence was clear, undeniable. Yet, a cold sense of betrayal washed over me as I realized just how deep the lies ran. It wasn't just a single mistake or oversight. This was a deliberate manipulation of facts, a calculated effort to push the blame onto me, to cover up the corruption at the heart of Novamed's operations. The hours slipped by unnoticed as I meticulously compiled everything. I knew I couldn't delay any longer. The longer I waited, the greater the risk that this would all be buried, dismissed as an unfortunate series of errors. But I couldn't let that happen. They had gone too far, I thought bitterly. They had taken everything from me. My reputation, my career, my trust in the very system I had spent so long upholding. I began to piece together the timeline of events, carefully marking every deviation from protocol, every piece of data that didn't add up. The most damning evidence, however, came from the trial protocols initiated by Dr. Glass, the shining star of Meditech Solutions. Her experiments were conducted at a breakneck pace, with timelines shortened and protocols altered without explanation. But it wasn't just the speed that bothered me, it was the data. The trial results, when compared to the raw data, didn't make sense. The numbers had been manipulated to present perfect results, too perfect to be true. When I had initially questioned these discrepancies, I was brushed off. "We have approval for an accelerated timeline," I had been told by Dr. Malcolm Whitner. "Don't worry about it, Aliana. Focus on operations. The results will come in line with the new schedule." His dismissal of my concerns had been more than just a refusal to listen. It had been a quiet nod to the kind of corporate culture I had hoped Novamed would never adopt. It was the kind of culture that valued speed over integrity, profit over truth. And then there were the chemical storage logs, those small, seemingly insignificant records that had been altered to fit the accelerated trials. As I traced the changes, I found that my credentials had been used to approve modifications to these documents. Documents I had never seen, approvals I had never made. My access had been used without my knowledge, and for what? To cover up mistakes? To push through data that would otherwise never have passed inspection? The realization hit me like a gut punch. I wasn't just being framed, I was being made an accomplice in their deceit. Why didn't I see this sooner? The question lingered in my mind, and for a brief moment I let myself doubt my instincts. Had I been too trusting? Too committed to the company that had nurtured me for so long? I wanted to scream, to throw my laptop against the wall, but instead I held my breath, closed my eyes, and let the anger pass through me. I couldn't afford to be emotional. Not now. Not when I had everything I needed to bring them down. The phone buzzed again, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was another message from Thomas. "You're not going to believe this, but they've already started interviewing replacements for you. Glass seems to think everything's fine. She's talking about her perfect results again. I can't believe how everything's shifting." Shifting? Everything's shifting? It was a cold reminder of how quickly the tides had turned. Dr. Glass had already moved on. She was the one who had been protected. The one who had been given free rein to alter data and make questionable decisions. And now, she was positioned as the golden child of Meditech, the very one who had been allowed to destroy everything I had worked for. The thought made my blood run cold. I didn't respond to Thomas's message immediately. There was nothing left to say. He knew as well as I did that I was no longer part of their game, but that didn't mean I wasn't going to finish it. I pulled up the emails I had gathered, the ones where Dr. Glass had initiated the changes to the trial protocols, where Malcolm had signed off on the alterations. It was all there, every lie, every cover-up. And I could feel the sting of betrayal in each word, each email, each altered document. The people I had trusted, the people I had trained, had sold out everything I stood for. And for what? For faster results? For the quarterly report? I could feel the weight of the decision pressing on me. I had two choices. I could bury this, let it all slide, and walk away quietly like they expected me to. Or I could do what I had always done, speak the truth, no matter the cost. I knew what I had to do. I took a deep breath, letting the resolve settle in my chest. My hands, though steady now, still trembled slightly as I composed a letter to the Institutional Ethics Board. I laid out everything, every inconsistency, every falsified record, every breach of protocol. I outlined the timeline, the altered data, and the unauthorized access to the chemical logs. When I was done, I reviewed it one last time. This wasn't just an accusation. This was proof. This was the truth, and it was in my hands now. I hit send. The email was gone. The evidence was out there. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't even about Novamed. This was about ensuring that no one, no matter how high up they were, could ever get away with compromising the integrity of science. The truth was finally coming to light, and there was no going back. I leaned back in my chair, my fingers pressing into my temples, trying to calm the storm of emotions swirling inside me. This is just the beginning, I thought. But it didn't feel like a victory. Not yet. But it would. It had to. The moment I hit send on the email to the Institutional Ethics Board, I felt a strange sense of weightlessness. It wasn't relief, nor was it satisfaction. It was the kind of emptiness you feel after taking a step into the unknown, knowing that the consequences of your actions are out of your control. I had done it. Exposed the truth, at least in part. But that didn't mean the battle was over. It was only just beginning. The silence in the room felt suffocating as I sat there staring at my laptop screen. The email had been dispatched, and the evidence was now in the hands of those who could, theoretically, do something about it. But I knew the system well enough to understand that the truth didn't always win. Sometimes the lies held more power. What if they ignore it? What if they find a way to discredit me? My thoughts swirled in endless loops. A small part of me still couldn't fully accept what had happened. That sense of betrayal, of being thrown out like a piece of trash after 15 years of loyal service, it gnawed at me, refused to let me rest. I stood up abruptly, pacing the room. What if it was all for nothing? What if, despite everything I had documented, they still managed to bury the truth? I had seen it before. The powerful covering up the weak, sweeping the dirt under the rug, maintaining their precious image at all costs. Dr. Glass had already moved on to the next chapter of her career, and Dr. Malcolm? He was a master manipulator. He would stop at nothing to protect himself, to save face. And Meditech. They were too entrenched in their corporate machine to care about anything as insignificant as the truth. No. I shook my head, dispelling the thought. I can't think like that. I've already made my move. The evidence was out there, yes, but there was still one part of me. One part of me that was still tangled in the web of corporate deceit. That wanted to do more. I could expose them all. I could bring down Meditech, bring down Dr. Whitner and Glass. It was tempting. Too tempting. I have to be careful. Revenge was a dangerous path to walk, especially when I was already in a precarious position. I had nothing left to lose. My career at Novamed had been destroyed, my reputation tarnished, but I wasn't sure if dragging everyone else down with me was the right choice. What would it cost me, I wondered. What would it cost the people I still cared about, like Thomas? I thought of him, of the young lab technician I had trained so many years ago. The one who had been loyal, who had trusted me. He had stood by me when others had turned away, and now I had to wonder. Was he still safe? Would he be dragged into this mess because of his association with me? My phone buzzed again, interrupting my thoughts. It was another message from Thomas. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it. I can't believe this is happening. People are saying you were set up, that Glass and Malcolm are behind it. Everyone's in shock. But, be careful. I'm worried about what happens next. I read his words twice, then a third time. His concern was clear, and I knew it wasn't just for me, it was for himself as well. He had worked with me, learned from me, and now it seemed he was caught in the crossfire of a situation that was spiraling out of control. I can't let him get hurt, I thought, my jaw tightening. The last thing I wanted was for Thomas to bear any of the fallout from my decisions. He had his career ahead of him. He deserved to have a future that wasn't overshadowed by the mess I was about to create. But what if that was the price? What if I had to bring them all down, even if it meant dragging others with me? I stood there for a long time, weighing the consequences in my mind. The moral dilemma was a sharp pain in my chest. I had always prided myself on my integrity, on my unwavering commitment to doing what was right. But now the lines were blurred. How far was I willing to go to seek justice? Was it worth potentially ruining the lives of others to expose the corruption that had tainted everything I had worked for? I paced again, my thoughts racing. What if I just focused on the truth? What if I let the system work as it should and didn't try to tear down everything in my path? I could let the ethics board handle this. I could let OSHA do their part. Maybe, just maybe, the system would work this time. But the anger inside me flared again. How many times had I been told that the truth didn't matter? How many times had I been ignored, pushed aside, dismissed as just another cog in the machine? No, I couldn't just sit back and wait for the system to take its course. I had to act. I had to ensure that the people responsible for this mess would never be allowed to get away with it. And that meant doing more than just sending an email. It meant I had to get my hands dirty. I closed my laptop with a decisive click. I had a plan now. I would go to the next step, but I would be strategic about it. No more wild emotions or impulsive decisions. I was going to take them down, but I was going to do it my way. Carefully. Methodically. And if anyone got hurt along the way, well, I had to make sure it wasn't Thomas. I grabbed my coat, my mind already moving toward the next phase of my plan. I couldn't stop now. Not after everything that had happened. Not after they had taken everything from me. But still, a small part of me, just a small part, whispered, Are you sure you're doing the right thing? I didn't have an answer. Not yet. The next morning I awoke to a relentless wave of messages. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, lighting up with notifications. I checked them without thinking, still groggy from a restless night. The first was from Thomas. The board meeting today. Everyone's on edge. They're covering for glass. I can feel it. Please be careful. The unease in his words sent a sharp jolt through my chest. Covering for glass. That was exactly what I feared. They were trying to sweep everything under the rug, make it look like she was blameless and I was the one to blame for it all. I knew the board had to be involved, but I hadn't expected this level of deceit, not at this scale. My fingers trembled slightly as I typed a quick reply. I'm going to make sure the truth gets out. Stay safe. The next message was from an unknown number. I opened it, my heart sinking as I read it. We need to talk. Urgent. Call me. The number wasn't familiar, but the message was clear. Someone wanted to talk. Could it be Malcolm or someone from Meditech? My mind raced. The possibilities were endless, and none of them were good. I stared at the message, torn between picking up the phone or ignoring it entirely. What if this was another attempt to manipulate me? But then, the thought that I couldn't ignore kept creeping up. What if it was someone willing to help me? With a steadying breath, I dialed the number, the line clicked, and a voice I recognized immediately answered. Aliana. Thomas's voice was low, but I could hear the anxiety in it. I'm at the lab. They've called a meeting with the board, and I'm supposed to sit in, but I overheard something. Something about you. They're planning to move fast on this, to bury everything. He paused for a moment. They're not just trying to save glass anymore, they're trying to save themselves. The words hit me hard, like a punch to the gut. I had suspected it, of course, but hearing it from someone inside, someone I had trusted, made the reality hit harder. What do they want from me? I asked, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. Malcolm's pushing hard for you to just walk away, Thomas continued. He's offering you a deal. They'll wipe everything clean, make it all disappear, but you have to stay quiet. No investigation, no further involvement. They want to move on. Pretend this never happened. I felt a coldness settle in my bones. So that's it. They were trying to buy me off, trying to erase everything that had happened and make me complicit in their lies. No, I had made my decision long ago. There was no turning back now. I won't accept their deal, I said firmly, the words falling from my lips as if they were a declaration of war. I've already made sure the truth is out there, and no matter what they offer me, I'm not walking away. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Thomas spoke again. I'm with you, Aliana. I'll keep gathering whatever I can, but you have to be careful. They won't stop. His words hung in the air like a warning, but there was no turning back now. I wasn't just fighting for my job anymore. I was fighting for everything I had believed in, my integrity, my career, my name. And if I had to bring them all down to make that happen, then so be it. I ended the call, my fingers trembling again, but this time with determination. I knew what I had to do. The evidence was already in the hands of the ethics board, but I needed more. I needed leverage. The truth alone wasn't going to be enough to take down people like Dr. Whitner and Dr. Glass. It wasn't going to be enough to make Meditech accountable for the damage they had done. I grabbed the sealed envelope I had prepared the night before, the one with copies of everything, the emails, the falsified records, and the timeline that connected the dots. I hadn't sent these documents to anyone yet. I had kept them in reserve, just in case I needed a final push, a final blow. And now it was time to use them. I walked out of my house, the weight of the envelope pressing against my side like a secret I had been carrying for far too long. Each step felt deliberate, purposeful. I knew that once I handed over that envelope, everything would change. But I wasn't afraid. I wasn't backing down. This wasn't just about me anymore. As I drove toward the Novamed building, my thoughts turned to Dr. Glass. She had been the one to accelerate the trials, the one to push for the falsified data. She had been given free rein by Dr. Whitner, who had turned a blind eye to everything that was happening. She had been the one to change the chemical logs, the one who had used my credentials without permission. But now, it was time for her to face the consequences. I reached the building and parked in my usual spot, just a few spaces away from the entrance. My heart pounded as I walked toward the doors. I could already hear the murmur of voices inside. The board meeting was in session, and this time, I wasn't going to be the one sitting on the sidelines. I was going to make sure they heard me, make sure they knew that I wouldn't go quietly. I walked past the receptionist who looked up at me in surprise. "Dr. Voss," she said hesitantly. "I didn't expect to see you here today." "I'm just dropping something off," I replied calmly, a smile playing at the corners of my lips. Though my insides were anything but calm, I handed her the envelope. "Please make sure this reaches the board of directors. It's important." As I turned to leave, I heard the faint sound of hurried footsteps behind me. I didn't need to look back to know who it was. Dr. Glass. "Aliana, wait," she called, her voice tight with desperation. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. "What do you want, Dr. Glass?" She caught up to me, her face flushed with concern. "Please, let's talk. What happened yesterday? It wasn't right. I tried to speak up, but you chose to remain silent," I interrupted, turning to face her. "Just like you chose to falsify the records. Just like you chose to use my credentials to approve changes I never saw." Her face paled. "How did you know?" 15 years, Dr. Glass," I said quietly. 15 years of watching people come and go. 15 years of knowing every system, every protocol. Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" The color drained from her face, and for the first time I saw the cracks in her confidence. But it was too late for apologies. The truth was already out, and there was no way to put it back in the bottle. "I'm done," I said, walking away without looking back. "The truth is already on its way." And as I left Novamed for the last time, I couldn't help but feel a sense of calm. This was it. The end of one chapter, the beginning of another. There was no turning back now. The days that followed felt like a blur, each one blending into the next as I waited for the fallout to hit. I had done what I set out to do, exposed the corruption, told the truth, and ensured the evidence was out there for all to see. But I knew that this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Now, I had to wait. The system would react, but how? Would they try to bury it all? Would I be dragged back into the very system I had tried so hard to escape? The tension in my chest never fully loosened. On the third day, after I sent the sealed envelope to the board, I received an email from the Institutional Ethics Board. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it. The contents were brief, but the implications were enormous. "Dear Dr. Voss, we have reviewed the evidence you submitted. The matter is being escalated for further investigation. Thank you for your courage in bringing these issues to our attention. Rest assured, the situation will be addressed accordingly. We will contact you shortly with the next steps." The email didn't say much, but I could feel the weight of it. This was no longer a small matter. It was going to ripple through the entire organization, and perhaps even beyond that. I knew I couldn't stop now. The ball was rolling, and I couldn't afford to let up. But even as I felt a flicker of hope, I couldn't ignore the nagging questions in the back of my mind. What would happen to me? What would happen to Thomas, who was still working at Novamed, still trapped in the web of this corporate mess? The next morning, as I sipped my coffee in the quiet solitude of my home, my phone buzzed again. It was from Thomas. I hesitated before opening it, unsure of what to expect. His message was short but heavy with meaning. "OSHA's here. They've started their inspection. It's not just about compliance anymore. They're digging into everything. People are freaking out." I felt my stomach drop. OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. If they were involved now, it was only a matter of time before the full extent of the misconduct would be exposed. No more cover-ups, no more lies. The truth was coming to light, whether anyone liked it or not. I put my phone down, staring at the screen, trying to process what I had just read. It was happening. The storm I had set in motion was gathering force, and there was no way to stop it. I had done everything I could to make sure the truth didn't get buried, but now it was out of my hands. The ball was in the courts of the Ethics Board, OSHA, and everyone else who had the power to act. The next few days felt like an eternity. The news began to trickle out. The investigation into Novamed and Meditech's practices started to dominate the headlines. The focus was on the falsified data, the safety violations, and the corporate greed that had caused so many corners to be cut. The pressure on Dr. Whitner and the leadership at Meditech grew, and it wasn't long before the company began to crack under the weight of its own secrets. Their reputation, once unshakable, was crumbling. By the end of the week, the first major public blow came. Meditech's stock value took a hit. Major investors began pulling out, citing concerns over the ethics of the company's research practices. The FDA issued a statement acknowledging the findings of the investigation, and soon the Department of Justice opened a federal inquiry into potential criminal wrongdoing. They couldn't cover it up now, I thought, a grim satisfaction settling in my chest. The truth was flooding to the surface, and no one could ignore it anymore. Then the phone call came. The one I had been half expecting, but dreading nonetheless. It was from the board of directors at Novamed. I wasn't sure what I had expected, an apology perhaps, or an attempt to offer me a deal. But what they offered instead was something I hadn't anticipated. "Dr. Voss," Harold Winthrop's voice came through the phone, calm but weary. "We owe you an apology. The events that led to your dismissal were not just unjust, they were likely criminal. We have initiated a full internal investigation and we are cooperating with the federal authorities. The actions of Dr. Whitner and several senior executives are under review, and as of today, Dr. Whitner has been terminated." I could feel my heart pounding as I listened to him continue. "We would like to offer you full reinstatement, along with a substantial compensation package for the damages done to your reputation and career. You will also have the opportunity to review and help restructure our compliance programs." I was stunned. Reinstatement? After everything that had happened? After they had publicly humiliated me? They had fired me without a second thought, and now they were offering me my job back? The offer was tempting, but I wasn't sure if I could go back to a place that had turned its back on me so completely. My integrity had been shattered, and while I appreciated the offer, I had already moved on. "I appreciate the offer, Harold," I said carefully, my voice steady despite the mix of emotions swirling inside me. "But I've already accepted a position elsewhere. However, I would be willing to consult during your transition period to help restore proper protocols and procedures. I can't let this happen to another person." There was a long silence on the other end of the line before Harold spoke again. "Of course, Dr. Voss. We understand. If there's anything we can do to help during this transition, please let us know." As the call ended, I sat there, processing everything that had just happened. The fallout had begun. Meditech's grip on Novamed was slipping, and it was only a matter of time before the full scale of the corruption would come to light. But it wasn't just about Novamed or Meditech anymore. It was about something much bigger. It was about ensuring that the people who had been hurt by this, like Thomas and like all the others who had worked under false pretenses, would not be forgotten. I had taken the first step in exposing the truth, and now I was going to help others learn from my experience. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about redemption. About ensuring that the lessons of integrity, transparency, and honesty were passed on so that no one else would have to go through what I had. The system was changing, slowly but surely, and I had played a part in making it happen. Later that evening, I received a text from Thomas. It was simple, but it made everything feel worth it. "Malcolm's gone, Glass is gone, and they said you were right all along. Thank you, Aliana." I smiled as I read the message, a sense of closure finally washing over me. The truth had won. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, press conferences, and meetings with the Ethics Board, OSHA, and various regulatory bodies. It felt like the world was moving at a pace I couldn't fully grasp, but in the midst of all the chaos, there was a sense of calm that gradually settled over me. I had done what I had set out to do. I had exposed the corruption. I had ensured that the truth was heard no matter the consequences. And now, it was time to move forward. The battle was over, but the war, at least the one that mattered, had been won. I had been offered a position at the University of Michigan's Medical Research Division, heading up a new department dedicated to research ethics and compliance training. The offer was unexpected but welcome, and it marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life. It wasn't about just rebuilding my career. It was about reshaping an entire system, helping future generations of researchers understand the importance of integrity in their work. This new position wasn't just a career move. It was a chance to ensure that what happened at Novamed would never happen again. The first day at the university was a blur. Walking into the lecture hall, I was struck by the weight of responsibility that came with the role. The students, young and eager, filled the seats, waiting for me to speak. I had prepared for this day, but nothing could prepare me for the emotions that flooded through me as I stood at the podium, looking out at the faces before me. These were the future of science, the future of research, and it was my job to guide them in ways I hadn't been guided, to teach them the lessons I had learned the hard way. I began my lecture on the importance of maintaining scientific integrity. I spoke of my years at Novamed, of the challenges I had faced, the choices I had been forced to make, and the eventual victory of exposing the truth. I was open, candid, and above all, honest. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I shared the struggles, the doubts, and the painful realization that the system I had once believed in was flawed. But I also shared the redemption that came with standing firm, with doing what was right, even when everything around you told you to turn away. By the end of the lecture, I could see the respect in the eyes of my students. They weren't just listening to a lecture, they were witnessing a first-hand account of what it meant to stand up for the truth, to put integrity above all else. The lesson I wanted to teach them wasn't about compliance or rules. It was about the moral responsibility that every researcher has to uphold the sanctity of their work. To never let greed, ambition, or pressure compromise the truth. As the students filed out of the room, one of them lingered behind. It was Thomas. He had come to the university to pursue further studies, and he had asked me to be his advisor. His face was lit up with a mixture of admiration and uncertainty, as if he was still processing everything that had happened. "I'm proud of you, Aliana," he said quietly, his voice filled with sincerity. "You've done something most people would never dare to do. And now you're teaching us to do the right thing, no matter the cost." I smiled at him, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. This was what it was all about. This was why I had fought so hard, why I had put everything on the line. It wasn't for recognition or accolades, it was for the next generation. For them to understand that integrity wasn't just a nice-to-have quality, it was the foundation of everything they would do. As I walked back to my office, I reflected on the long journey I had taken. From the small research lab at Novamed, to this moment, where I was standing in a position to shape the future of medical research. It was a humbling realization, and it made me appreciate the journey even more. The personal costs, the betrayals, the nights spent wondering if I had done the right thing, all of it had led me here. And here, I had found a purpose that was far greater than anything I had imagined. But there was more to be done. The university position was only the beginning. I had plans to expand the training programs, to push for more comprehensive research ethics standards in laboratories across the country. And as for Novamed, it was clear that the organization was in the process of rebuilding itself, though I had no intention of returning. I had done my part there, and now it was someone else's turn to clean up the mess. Then, just as I was starting to settle into this new life, an unexpected email arrived. It was from Dr. Elaine Novak, the founder of Novamed, the woman who had once been my mentor. I hadn't heard from her since I had been dismissed, and the email made my heart race with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Aliana," it began, "I've been contacted by the ethics board regarding your report, and I wanted to express my deep appreciation for what you've done. You've stood for everything this institution was built upon, and for that I will always be grateful. There's much more to discuss, and I would like to meet with you, if possible. Perhaps there's more we can do together to ensure that the mistakes of the past are never repeated." Her words were a balm to my soul. Despite everything that had happened, despite the betrayal and the years of corporate manipulation, there was still a part of Novamed, still a part of the original mission, that could be saved. And perhaps, just perhaps, there was a way to rebuild it. Piece by piece, from the ground up. I sent a response, agreeing to meet her, and as I set my phone down, I couldn't help but smile. The journey had taken unexpected turns, but in the end, it had led me to a place where I could make a difference, not just for myself, but for the future of science itself. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, and I knew there would be challenges to come. but I was ready for whatever lay ahead. This time, I wasn't alone. And this time, I knew the truth would always prevail. As I sat back in my chair, looking out the window at the university campus, I felt a profound sense of peace. My story, my fight, had become more than just a personal victory. It had become a beacon for others, an example that no matter how difficult the road, no matter how deep the betrayal, the truth could always find its way to the surface. And that, in the end, was all that mattered.